Добрый вечер, всем привет, это снова Сергей, канал Другая Америка. У нас в гостях мои родители в законе, мой тесть Герри, и я его попросил рассказать о истории его автомобилей и мотоциклов за его жизнь. Интервью будет на английском языке, и я поставлю иллюстрации с теми автомобилями, которые у него были. Alright, Gary, so we are ready for you to tell us a story about your cars.
Well, I grew up in Detroit. I was able to start early at age 14 in 1951 with a car, but before that I had motorbikes when I was 11 and 12. My first auto was a 1931 Model A.
That's a Ford.
That's a Ford, two-door sedan. And you know, as a young person, I fixed it up, but didn't restore it properly. It had different upholstery and that. Then after that, I got a 1939 Ford, and I was probably 16 when I got that.
Also Model A?
No, 39 Ford they've gone into V8s by that time. The Model A, 1931 I had was the last of the four-cylinder. And 32 they started the V8 and they kept that until 1953, same basic V8 flathead engine. And so I had that 39 Ford, was stick shift on the floor. That's when I met Pat. And I had that probably a couple of years. Then I got a 1946 Ford, which was after World War I.
World War II.
And that was a Ford also, two-door sedan.
So they didn't have like names for the models, that was just
Just
1946 Ford?
two-door deluxe sedan. Yeah, they didn't, not like now. They're basically plain back then. And then after that, I had a 1950 Ford that I customized, a two-door sedan. It was still a flathead V8. And then I got married, 57, and we had a 1956 Ford two-door sedan, and that was overhead valve V8 by that time, starting to get plushy and more horsepower. So we took that to Texas with us, and at the same time I also had a 1951 Ford two-door six-cylinder. They had a six-cylinder, but the only one I had was inline six-cylinder overhead valve. They even put that kind of engine in the later Mustangs in 1965, 66, but they...
So is there any reason you were buying Fords, like not touching anything else, like Chevrolets or whatever the other model, Dodges?
Come to think about it, at one time I had a 1940 Buick. That was a fine car, black 40, you know, just before the war. That was an upgrade from the Chevrolets, and they had...
The Buick that time already belonged to General Motors?
Yeah, if General Motors had started Cadillac, Buick, and Pontiac, and yeah, that was General Motors. Black, nice car. And somewhere along there, I started buying extra cars just to have for myself. Toys, you know. I remember having a 1937 Oldsmobile. That was also General Motors. And back then they were all not V8s yet until you get into the 50s with General Motors. They were straight 8s, straight 6s.
So you're talking V8, it means the cylinders were in the shape of V?
V,
like
four
angled.
cylinders on each side. Instead
And
of
straight A's, it's the cylinders that are like vertical.
Yes. I did have a when I was in the Army, 1951, I had a 53 Buick. And that was a big car, General Motors again, and that was a straight 8. But I think it was in 1955 they went to the V8 too, just like the Chevrolet. Chevrolet never had a V8 like Ford. Ford had it forever. But Chevrolet stuck with a straight 6-cylinder until 1955 was their first V8.
And making it in a V shape, the cylinders, it means that you can like more compact size engine, like a straight 8 is way bigger than
a lot longer.
Is it? Is that?
I don't know what all the advantages of that were, but just before I went in the Army, when I had the 51 Ford for an extra car, the straight 6, and the 56 Ford, which we later took to Texas, I had a 1956 BSA motorcycle. That was before all the Hondas and
BSA, that's the brand?
British bike, yeah.
Oh, British.
They had Harleys back then, and British, the BSA, and the Royal Enfields. They were about the same. They had single cylinders and double cylinders, fast bikes, but not as fast as the newer ones. By that time, I was like 20, 21 years old. I probably have had well over 100 cars in my life, at least. And I started in, I restored my first Model A properly in 1961, just before Christmas, about this time, 61. I bought one that really needed restoring, and I tore it all apart.
What year was that?
That was a 1928 Model A. I went back to the 1928. 28 was the first Model A, 29, 30, and 31. Before that, it was a Model T, which is a kind of a primitive type car. They're not nearly as sturdy as the Model A. And I had that, I found proper upholstery and restored it, and I tore it all apart myself down to the frame. I got pictures of it, fenders off, and did everything myself, painting it. Except upholstery, I had a Mexican fellow in San Antonio upholstery. All the upholstery material and his labor only came to $100 back then. You couldn't even get a side panel done for $100 nowadays. Yeah, the upholstery and one like that now would probably cost you $10,000, $12,000. And the old cars started getting expensive, I would say, in the 70s, 60s, 70s. I could actually buy restored cars cheaper than you could cost to restore them until that time. And it's almost that way now. But after that, I'll just go through the ones I had. In 1973, I found an old Hudson Gangster limousine.
That was interesting. The story of that car. So what year?
23.
1920 Hudson limousine. And
Yeah.
that's the one was like a gangster, you said,
It
right?
was originally owned by a gangster in New York, Bugsy Moriarty. And he ran down and killed an opposing gang member in 1925. So the newspaper article said. They couldn't find the car, just disappeared. They knew he had done it, and even when I had bought it, I bought it in 1973, it still had the fender bumped up, like could have been
Okay, hit and run kind of deal.
Yeah, but it disappeared until 1959. They found it bricked up in walls in a big warehouse they were tearing down across the Hudson River in New Jersey from New York. It only had almost 30,000 miles on it. Still had the original tires and everything. It was just all original. And I managed, it took me about 3 years to buy that, but I bought it in 1973 from the man who had possession of it after they found it. He was in South Bend.
How much was it?
Back then, as I fought with him for a couple of years, he agreed if he ever sold it to me, he'd sell it to me for $2,800, which is ridiculous.
$2,800.
Cheap. That thing's worth now $25,000. And he was in South Bend. I kept bugging him for about 2 years. Finally went down there one time and I said, "It's got to be a price you'll sell it for." And of course, in the 70s, things were still cheap. You could buy a lot of the nice ones for $3,000.
How much was the new car in
About
70s?
$3,000.
So it's the price of a new car. So it's about $25,000 now, pretty much.
Yeah, at least that. And Finally, he said, "Okay, I'll sell it to you for $3,600. Originally, he told me he'd sell it to me for $28. And so I said, "Okay." It surprised him. I gave him a big deposit that night, and I said, "I'll come back Thursday and pick it up." It was all original upholstery. Had a freight train whistle that screamed on the exhaust. Yeah, the ignition, you could start it, turn it with a lever, like a lot of cars in that year, a lot of Chryslers, Chevys, Buicks. And then this had a key that locked the transmission, so you couldn't shift it. But otherwise, you could start the thing, and just couldn't shift it anywhere if you didn't have the key. But then, let's see, at that time, I had that. I'll just go through some that I bought, and not a lot of detail. I bought a 1925 Chevrolet, all restored at Notre Dame, in about 1974. I had that and the Hudson. I had a 1950 Dodge fluid drive, like my DeSoto now, but it was a Dodge. And I had a 1931 Model A coupe with a rumble seat, the mother-in-law's seat out back. All at the same time, and then I started selling one now and then and buying others. I had a beautiful 1934 Studebaker with suicide doors, all original. I should never sold that. It was a beautiful car. Studebaker with sloping fenders, 3 speeds on the floor, all like my 23 Hudson, and the Studebaker had all suicide doors. They opened up from the front to the back, all 4 of them. And I bought a found, took me 2 years to buy it, a 1922 Senador Model T, which was rare for that year because it had a starter and a windshield wiper, and it only had 19,000 miles on it. Found it buried in a garage out in Stevensville.
What brand was it?
1923 Senador Model T.
Senador.
Yeah, on the driver's
So there was a car
side.
company called Senador?
No, it was a Ford.
Okay, Ford.
Yeah, Ford. But the only way you could get into it had one door behind the rider's seat. You got in there and you went up to the front seat, or you went to the back seat.
Oh.
Then somewhere back in there I had a running, all original 1926 Model T Roadster pickup. So the top
That's
would
cool.
go down, and I had a pickup box, and I used to put a chartreuse rabbit beside me, and drive around town with that one. Then I also bought a 1928 Model A again. I had a lot of Model A's. They were all that from 1928 to 1931 was the last Model A's, and then the 32s were different. But I had a 1929 Model A, what they called a fruit and vegetable wagon, and it was all wood from the dash, the doors, and the box in the back like a pickup, and it had a roof over it. And the people sold fruit and vegetables in that year, up and down.
It's like a fruit stand on the wheels.
Yeah, like they have in a lot of countries yet. People go down with push wagons and stuff and sell that way. An orange here, or grapefruit there, and bananas. That was a neat car. There's so many I shouldn't have sold because they're just rare. Never get them back again. And I can tell you now, I've got this 1950 DeSoto, which is all original. Of course, that was a Chrysler product. It started Chrysler, DeSoto, Dodge, and Plymouth. That was a different ranking as far as lushness. The DeSoto was almost like a Chrysler. And it's just a straight flathead 6. It didn't even have the overhead valves yet. It's all original, 82 horsepower, fluid drive. The only thing it doesn't work on it is the gas gauge, but it's all original with 68,000 miles. Other than that, there's probably others in there that I've had, I don't know.
You had that green model something Ford that you bought in down with North Carolina, that dealer guy that you constantly buy cars
Oh,
that you sold too cheap.
well, that was a Model A. That
Oh.
was a, yeah, I had that one, and that was one of the other Model A's that was beautifully restored. And I had it several years and stupidly sold it.
Yeah, that was a nice car. It was a great shape.
Yeah, and it just like new and solid. All those old cars. Well, for instance, that 23 Hudson Gangster limousine was rare because of its age and belonging to a gangster. But it had two spares strapped on each fender with belts.
Mm-hmm.
And it had two spares on the back, one behind the other, with just one little tail light in the middle. And
That one was a super fast car too, right?
well, yeah, there was a man that helped me work on it that was a Hudson man. He's dead now. But this is back in the 70s. He was still alive and he worked on it for me because he knew everything about it. And he said, yeah, the gangsters everywhere in the country used the big old Hudsons, the straight eights. Mine was a straight six, but they had straight eights also, engines. He said they were the fastest thing on the road, but they only get about 8 miles a gallon.
What is that the saying was something about passing anybody on the road but the gas station?
Oh, yeah.
They'll pass everything on the road but the gas
Everything
station.
on the road but a gas station. Back then, because gas stations were even rare back then, you know, you had to carry spare cans. In fact, on the running board, they had a little folding gate that was secured, maybe 2 or 3 gas cans
Oh, no
extra,
kidding.
or luggage. You could put luggage there. None of them had trunks. Oh, and the Hudson was so rare. It had pull-down shades in the back. There's windows in the back doors, but then there's 2 more windows behind it, and it had pull-down shades that go up and down, you know, and the back window did also. And it still has that in there. The original, last time I sold it, I'm sure it's still in there original. There's no reason to take that out. Had flower vases for flowers in it. You know, it was just a big old gangster car. They used to run illegal liquor back in the 20s with that stuff.
That one you had 2 times, right? You sold it
Yeah,
and you
that
bought
one I
back.
bought in 1973, and I had it till about 1985. And I drive most of them daily. But I got tired of it, I suppose. I don't know, I didn't. Stupid. I mean, it's so rare. Had no reason to sell it. Didn't need the money. But I thought, oh well, Pat was pushing me. I had 4 cars at that time and only a place to put. Well, I couldn't even put them in the garage because I had mattresses in there back then. I was selling mattresses out of the garage. So then I sold it to a pastor and I took it to Wisconsin for him. He had it about 9 years. And then he said, well, I'm taking a pastorship in San Diego. You want to buy it back? So we agreed on a price, about the same thing I sold it for. But when I had it several years ago, maybe 6, 7. And somebody heard I had it and offered to buy it from me. He didn't know anything about cars. But it needed, by that time, it needed some valves in the motor and rings. It was losing a little compression, harder to start. Once it got going, it'd be all right. But they are hard to start. So I told the man that we have somebody in town that could overhaul it, fix it. It's very simple because they're all open. You just pull the pan and you take the head off, flat head. And so we had a guy do it, and it seemed like it was like $400. He found new rings for that 1923 and valves, and when I had it done after I sold it to this man. Then I had to take it to Wisconsin. Man, it ran so good. I said, oh, why did I sell this thing? I mean, it just would start right out so perfect, you know. It needed restoring. I mean, another thing about that Hudson, it was rare because it was all aluminum body. And it was painted dark blue. But the hood and the fenders, hood and back fenders, and bumper were all steel. There wasn't a lot of chrome on that car. The only thing that was chrome was, in fact, they wasn't even chrome. It was they had a rim around the headlight. Most people had chromed, or the headlight was chrome.
Right.
This was all painted black. It was just a hoodlum black. You probably could see it at night, you know. It's one of those dark.
Oh, that's funny.
It had the horn, everything worked, but the upholstery was starting to get show a little cotton back in the shoulders on my side, the driver's side. But that's about it. I'm trying to think. When I was in Texas, in the Army, I restored a 28, and I brought it back here, and I bought and sold that one twice too. It's up in DeWitt, Michigan. After I restored it in the first part of 1962. So how many years is that? 42, 50 some years. And I could go see it. People said, yeah, if you want to come and see it, you can see it again. It's up near Lansing, Michigan. There's probably some other cars in there as far as motorcycles. Had a lot of motorcycles, Hondas. My biggest, fastest one was I think it was like a 1976 or something. Juice cooled, water cooled Suzuki. It wasn't air cooled. Suzuki 750. Man, that thing would throw you off the seat or take off without you. Of course, if you really gunned it, it was gone. But I finally sold or gave the last one basically to my grandson. It was a 250 Honda Rebel. It only had 4,000 miles on it, and it was a 1987. So that was getting pretty old there. I mean, you're talking almost 30 years old with only 4,000.
I thought that old.
But in between, I had Honda 450s and 250s and 125 dirt bikes, and I had a Royal Enfield back when I was before I had my first car, 125 Royal Enfield, 2 cycles, smoked like crazy. I really started young on those things. I was about 11 when I had my first motor thing. Drove without a license until I was 16. Never got caught back then. And then I wasn't in the city either.
Right. When did they make a law about wearing seatbelts?
Oh boy. You know, this 1950 DeSoto that I have is no seat belts in that. It does have turn signals. Back then we had fog lights and spotlights. But I don't remember when the first seat belts came in. Probably, I had a 60, beautiful. I just saw a picture of it yesterday in my house. When I was in the Army, I bought a sleek looking 1960 Ford Fairlane 500, 4-door, kind of a cream colored, cream tan. It's got beautiful lines, stick shift. And I don't know, I had it 6-8 months and somebody wanted to buy it and made some money on it. That's another one. If I had it today, of course, that was way back in 1961, 61 when I had that. So it'd probably be shot now, but if I'd have stored it someplace. The big problem is with antiques, you gotta be rich and have a big, huge pole barn. Because there's all of them I could have kept, but I just really stupidly sold them.
So out of all the cars, which one you would like to get back? Probably Hudson?
Yeah, that one. And my Model A Coupe with a rumble seat was just like brand new. The man had restored it. He came to school at Andrews and wanted to sell it for pay his schooling. He did in South Dakota. And I bought at the same time that from him for like $3,200. Now you couldn't buy it for $25 the way it is shaped. I got pictures of that and had a Christmas card made of that. And at the same time, I bought the 50 Dodge from him, which was original. Never been restored. It's like my DeSoto. And it was plain. My DeSoto is more deluxe. But they're all 4 doors and fluid drive. They were all the same. Motors and everything were the same.
You didn't have a Hudson Hornet?
No, my dad had a Hudson. That's what's been one of my dreams, is to have a 1951 Hudson Hornet. The bathtub styles came out in 1958. My dad bought one right when they first came out. Nobody else had one in our area. Slope back. Ooh,
Is that like the one they showed in cartoon cars that we went to see in the movie?
Yeah, that's
Doc.
it. And so that year was 48, 49, 50, 51, and 52. And then they started merging. The car company started merging with Nash, and they all started getting uglier. But from the 48 Hudson, they all looked pretty much the same. And they had a 6-cylinder, which my dad had. Well, the first one he bought was an 8, straight 8 again, flathead. Hudson, I don't think they ever had a V8, even when they went out of business. I think they were just running the fast one that was in that movie, Cars, was just a twin carburetor, 6-cylinder, not even an 8-cylinder. It was winning races, man. It was for 2 years. Nothing could beat it. Big old Chrysler 180 horse V8s. They'd have these 2-mile dirt tracks in Detroit. I used to go watch those. And they raced them all across the country like they race stock cars now. But boy, Hudson's just about took every race for a couple of years. It's too bad some of those cars went out. The Studebaker went out, Hudson went out, Packard went out. All about the same time they merged in their like 52 to 57, 58, and then they were gone.
It didn't work out.
I'm trying to think what else. There was Hudson, Nash, Studebaker, Packard. Packard was a beautiful car and really expensive car. All the years they built it. And about 1951 they changed the style to more like the Hudson, and it just didn't have the pizzazz that the old 40s and 30s cars had. I had a lot of 40, 41 Fords. They were kind of junk. I had a paper route for about 35 miles out there when I was 16, 17. And the roads were rough, dirt, and they get muddy and boom, boom, boom. So I'd buy these old 40 Fords for 25, 50, 7,500 bucks, and just drive until the body was falling off. Motors would run like crazy. And I'd take it out in the field and I'd tear around, try to roll it over. But I never did roll one. But I bought a lot of those just to run my paper route while I had a better car to drive,
Interesting.
Yeah, I should start writing more of my history myself. I have done it up to, I think, 8 years old. And when I started getting into cars and teenage years.
Oh, that's a really good story.
Different sections of my life, yeah. I mean, I was Detroit. That was Motor City. They weren't made anywhere else, man. I mean...
There was no Japanese cars, nothing.
No,
right?
man. When the first Japanese car I remember coming was a Datsun. And the way it got its name, American companies are over there trying to get the Japanese to build a car for them to bring them import over here. And the Americans were talking to the executives, and the executive over there said, well, how soon do you want us to build cars? And the guy said, 2 or 3 weeks we want one. He says, Datsun? That's how it got its name. Oh man, they were terrible. Rust. In fact, even American cars, rusted. I mean, they go 4, 5, 6 years ago in the 40s and 50s, 60s. Man, they'd rust through fast. But rarely do you see a rust through car now unless it's 12, 15 years old.
All right.
Yeah, they built
better paint job, better treatment, probably.
Yeah, they had some what they call a Z-Bart treatment. You buy it new, and then you say you want to spend 150 bucks, and they sprayed all this tar under it and in grooves, and they drill a hole and spray it in the post, then plug the hole. They don't do that anymore. They got some kind of coating right from the factory. They put it on, it's thin, not ugly.
Well, cool. Thank you very much for the story.
All right, now you get the Russians to understand it.
Yep.